Okay. Bismillah. Bismillah walhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wasallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So we are looking at the 11th hadith in the 40 hadith collection of Imam Nawawi. If people want to pull it up, we didn't meet last week, I think, because it was Labor Day, right? But we'll be meeting consistently going forward on Mondays, inshallah, starting at around 6:30. And then at Maghrib time, we're going to be resuming our potluck iftars. Tonight, we have from a new halal pizza place, like some food that's been donated, as well as just the other stuff we normally have, bagels and yogurt and these kinds of things. It's being carted in right now. That can we'll have at Maghrib time. What we'll do is we'll move these tables in at Maghrib, and then we can decide as a group, just as Maghrib's getting earlier, how we want to approach it. Do we want to continue the halakha after people have gotten food for a little bit? Do we take a pause with iftar? But we'll let we can kind of talk that out as it goes. But it's going to be getting about like 5-10 minutes earlier each week. So probably cut into what we're doing here. If we start at 6, it's probably going to be a little bit too early for some people. So we'll keep it at 6:30. And then on the other end of it, if we stick around till Isha time, we'll pray Isha as soon as it comes in. Does that make sense? So people kind of took a pause or have been consistent with it. You want to probably just resume kind of the fasts on Mondays and Thursdays. These are recommended days to fast. It's one of the reasons why we do these potluck iftars as well, especially as we're getting into like the winter. The days are getting shorter in the fall, so the fasts will be a lot shorter than what they were in Ramadan or in the course of the summer. And then the weather is getting cooler as well, so you want to be able to anticipate just strategically how you could build a relationship with it at a time when the window is much lesser. It'll be a little easier to engage. So can somebody read the hadith? If we can read it in Arabic, it's English. Yeah, go ahead.
I only have the English. So.
Yeah, that's fine.
On the authority of Al-Hasan bin Ali, the grandson of the Messenger of Allah, who said, I memorized from the Messenger of Allah his saying, leave that which makes you doubt for that which does not make you doubt.
Great. Can somebody read the Arabic? You have it in front of you, the 11th hadith, Imam Nawawi, 40 hadith. Will someone? Not can you? Yeah, go ahead.
عن أبي محمد الحسن بن علي بن أبي طالب صدق رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وريحانته رضي الله عنهما قال حفظت من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم دع ما يريبك إلى ما لا يريبك رواه الترمذي.
Jazakallah khair. So we looked at this hadith for a few weeks now, and we talked about it in a few different frames. And the first time we talked about it, we talked about how remarkable it is in the way that the chain is transmitted, how it expresses the affection that the Prophet ﷺ has for his grandson, and how when people are studying this, they're reading this again and again and again. We talked about it from the standpoint of some of the legality of how certitude outweighs doubt. There's a legal maxim in our tradition that says certainty is not lifted by doubt. And how some of that factors in. And we talked about some examples. If you're praying and you don't remember if you prayed like the correct number of cycles, doing more is better than doing less. So in like a 2-unit, 2 rak'ah prayer, a 3-4 rak'ah prayer, if you know you did 3, but you're not sure if you did 4, you do 1 more than less. Or if you were doing like tawaf around the Kaaba, kind of circumambulating, as you see people when they go for pilgrimage and they circle around the Kaaba and you do 7 circuits, if you're not sure if you did 7 or 6, you would do 1 extra as opposed to doing 1 less. And kind of looked at this concept of doubt in a few different ways. Today we want to be able to understand this in a more kind of practical sense of how it is that we wrestle with doubt and what this hadith is calling us towards in terms of just overall wellness and a state of centeredness in matters that really impact a lot of us day to day. Da' ma yuribuk ila ma la yuribuk is not just about, am I sure that I'm praying someplace that's clean or not, right? Or have I removed like anything that's kind of an impure substance from my clothing? But you think about how much of your day and your psyche gets permeated with insecurity, with self-doubt, with self-deprecations, with imposter syndromes, and not in a way where we can just turn it off, right? We're not robots. You don't have something that says, now I'm happy, now I'm sad, now I am full of self-doubt, now I'm full of clarity or confidence. And it's something that impacts people in a lot of different ways. I'm in an unfamiliar setting. I don't know if I really deserve where it is that I'm at. I'm not sure if my parents will respond to me well when I tell them I want to marry this person or I don't want to study this thing anymore. It seems like everyone else is doing a lot better at life than I am. I'm in a place where I don't know if people really like me or not. Like the doubt has a place that is concretely coming from something, and it's consequential of something likely also. Do you know? So if I'm sitting in conversation with certain people, I don't have doubt within myself, but I'm in certain settings, I do find doubt within myself, right? I find myself in situations, environments that inculcate some of that, and it becomes now a seat through which, on a spiritual level and theological level, like shaitan purposely gets us. The first dua that is in the Quran that we make regularly, right? And don't think about it as trivia knowledge or something that is obvious, but think about it deeply and critically. Like we say multiple times in a day, Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, guide us to a straight path, right? Yeah, she knows what's up, right? Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. Like we say it again and again and again. It's the first dua in the Quran for a reason. And that whole idea is a sense of hidayah. May Allah grant us hidayah, that we're in a place where we have a sense of certitude directionally, right? Think about where you are in the most literal of senses. If you're unfamiliar in surroundings and you're lost and you don't know where to go or what to do, right? We are blessed in that we all have computers in our pockets that we can just tap in anything, and it tells us a restaurant near me, halal restaurant near me, this near me, that near me. But you can go to some place of the world where your phone doesn't work, you don't speak the language, you're lost. Every year that we've gone for Umrah, typically there's like an older woman that we'll run into at some point or another in Mecca or Medina who's been separated from her family members, and she just doesn't know how to get back to her hotel. And if you've been in Medina or Mecca, like everything fundamentally looks the same. And you're thinking about also like millions of people coming from around the world. Like we've met people in Medina and Mecca who they don't have access to plumbing in their homes or their villages. And when they go into hotels where they have toilets, they've never seen a toilet before, right? And it's not meant to be a humorous situation, but to illustrate a point that they'll think like the toilet is a mechanism to wash their foot for wudu because they've never seen something like this before, right? They've never seen, for example, in some countries, like women don't go to the masjids. And just thinking about that objectively, and they go into the haram in Mecca or Medina, and they see all these men and women praying in this place, it sets for them now a reflection point that's different from where they came, or these massive cranes that are constructing buildings. All of this stuff is unfamiliar in a place that has familiarity. And you can imagine someone as old as your grandmother gets lost in this place. And she doesn't know where her hotel is because it's not on the first row of hotels where all the Americans stay, but it's in a hotel that's miles away that you have to take a bus to get to the masjid and you just stay there all day and you don't know where to go. And she's filled now with an anxiety that's laden with doubt. I don't know how to get where I am to where I want to be. I'm in this place where it's unfamiliar. I don't speak the language. Arabic is not my primary. The culture doesn't have people necessarily talk to me because I'm also like female. Where do I go? What do I do? And that sense of doubt that she has only gets placated and alleviates when there's a certitude now directionally of this is how I get back to the people that I came here with. Do you see what I mean? That's what you're saying to God when you say, Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. Like, don't just show it to me, but guide me to it and guide me upon it and walk with me on it so that you're on this thing and you're not meeting doubt. You know where you're going. And the frenzy that comes up that says, I don't know what is happening around me. I don't really get it. I don't know where to go or what to do. It manifests within us in a lot of different ways. And here, the ease to the anxiety in this hadith, da'ma yuribuk ila ma la yuribuk, leave that which causes you doubt for that which does not cause you doubt. It's going to only be actualized as deeply as possible if at the junctures we're in now in our spiritual trajectories, we have an affirmed awareness as to, well, what creates doubt within me in the first place? What creates insecurity within me in the first place? What are the things that alleviate those things for me? And so today we want to flesh out some of those things. Does that make sense? So I'd like for us to do, just so we can get started talking, if you could turn to the persons next to you, like, what is it that creates doubt to begin with? You know, what is it that can cause doubt within us? And don't think about it just myopically. Think about it subjectively as well as broadly speaking, so that we know what is adversarially used against us in different ways. But we want to start out with that, right? I can't leave that which causes me doubt for that which does not cause me doubt if I don't know fundamentally what causes me doubt in the first place. And I'm constantly in a place where I'm bombarding myself multiple moments of my wakeful day in environments that are purposely built to create that sense of insecurity within me, to create that sense of doubt within me. Does that make sense? So in any capacity you can think of, in the most literal senses of systems and structures, in terms of spiritual adversaries, shaitan, iblis, like whatever it is that you have experienced or have you seen people experience, what are the sources of doubt? What can consequently yield doubt for us, inwardly, outwardly? If we could talk about it for a bit, and then we'll come back and discuss. If you don't know the person's name next to you, share some names, and then you can go from there, and then we'll talk it out as a group. But go ahead.
A lot of the structures that revolves around comparing yourself to other people, which I think there is some benefit to that. It's all negative in the sense that it's like Like I don't care. Measure yourself against other people, but when then there's that added layer of like, but then you're not. Like I think measuring is not like that rhetoric around like, oh, like, even like from your parents, which isn't necessarily like, but like, oh, so we got this, like, why didn't you get this? You know what I mean? Yeah, I love that song. Yeah, it's
All right. What's rank number one? And sometimes I feel like obviously okay, I wasn't that bad.
Let's go.
So also I feel like there's like a I think that's like a cliche phrase, like no one else around me in my ear.
So literally, but I'm like not.
So it's probably not
Yeah. Or like
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know where
Okay. So what are some of the things? Like what is it that causes doubt or creates doubt within us? Yeah.
I would say like right now it's really prevalent. Like you're working in an area that you may think that isn't combined with like being halal. I would say if you're working at an institution that supports things that you would have doubt, like will I be accounted for it on day of judgment?
Okay. Great. Right. Like the source of our livelihood that could create an uncertitude of what tomorrow might bring. Right. Not having control over something. What else creates doubt? What else do we discuss? Yeah.
Yeah, like everyone's built different at the end of the day. There's so many different triggers that can like spark that doubt, and you can compare it, have analogies for days with it. But for a few things, it's like like let's say you're applying to school, apply like 6 schools, you don't get into the first 5. You're gonna think that you're not. You shouldn't. It's easier said than done, but you're gonna think you don't get into the 6th one. Another thing is where if you're conscious of Allah, right, that instills in you the confidence to not have that self-doubt, because let's say you're supposed to be praying and you're not consistent with your prayer, and you end up missing your prayer because you're self-doubting yourself. Praying will instill that confidence because it'll make you conscious yet again of Allah. Believing, I think it's called tawakkul. And like that's obviously a huge thing at the end of the day, like having that mindset that no matter what's going on, like I said before, there's so many different triggers. Just getting distracted so easily, and a lot of like you mentioned too, like people compare themselves too many times to too many different things, and it just like literally just like you're just keep digging the hole, and it's just a tunnel that like there is a light You got to turn around pretty much.
Other thoughts? Where does it come from? The doubts.
I think part of it is like your own self-image. We talked a little bit about comparison and how like a lot of doubt comes from comparison, but it's also having at least in these systems, there's like this sense of like injustice, and how prevalent it is that you have a doubt that the world around you isn't just. Therefore, like no matter what you do, there's always a doubt that the world, like I think of certainty as justice. That, like I compared the divine law, justice with certainty. And so when you have the world that's unfair, unjust, you can't have certainty around anything, and that creates a lot of doubt among us.
Okay. Other thoughts? Yeah.
When you're making decisions like intellectually versus in your heart, like the mind is primed to like overthink and overanalyze versus if something is anchored from a decision coming from the heart, it's less likely to have to go through that scrutiny.
Yeah.
Being in a state of mental or emotional fatigue can shake up confidence and make us prone to doubt.
Great. Someone else? Yeah.
I believe it comes from shaitan, that gives you was I think it's called, so that we don't believe that Allah will give you the class. The one that you need.
Yeah. Yeah, and all these things make sense, right? And we want to be able to delineate individually as a group, like thought process, what is doubt the consequence of versus what does then doubt bring me to? They're two different things, right? Doubt can be created as a result of something, and then the doubt in and of itself can then consequently yield something, right? Da'ma yuribuk ila ma la yuribuk. You can use this in the examples that are illustrated, right? I don't know if I broke my wudu. And so what does it tell us? Well, unless like you heard something or smelled something that gives you certitude, you know you did wudu, so you go with what you know and not just what you think or perceive, right? And if you take like what is given as an example in fiqh and then you analogize it to these other things, sometimes it's a little bit harder because it's happening now in an inward capacity, or we find ourselves bombarded in systemic and structural inequities that are purposely built to create doubt within us, right? I'm not good unless I have money. Where does it say that in the Quran? If anything, what the Quran and the Hadith tell us is that it's more likely that people who have less will go to Jannah than people who have more, because the more you have, the more you're accountable for. Like you're going to be asked about more stuff if you have more stuff, not less stuff. I can't be asked about how I use the chair if I don't have the chair, right? But if you have chairs, you're going to be asked about how did you treat the chairs that you have? Do you know what I mean? Every single thing has that accountability mechanism, but it's hard now when the structures are rooted and then there's spiritual adversaries that are purposely built to create doubt. If you open up the 7th chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-A'raf, it's 16th verse. Let's open that up really quick. It's chapter 7, verse 16, Surah Al-A'raf. So this is within like an Adamic narrative of creation. The verses before are talking about Adam alayhi salam's creation, Iblis being told to prostrate. He doesn't. I am of fire. He's of dirt, right? And now this 16th verse offers us some insight. Can someone read it to us? The English, the Arabic, either or is fine. 7:16. Yeah, go ahead.
He said, "For leading me astray, I will lie in ambush for them on your straight path."
Okay. Can someone read the Arabic? Yeah, go ahead.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قال بما أغويتني لأقعدن لهم صراطك المستقيم.
Great. So you're making this dua every day. Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. Right? Guide me to the sirat al-mustaqim. And shaitan is telling Allah, I'm waiting for them on the sirat al-mustaqim. Your sirat al-mustaqim. That's where I'm going to be seated. So it's inevitable that you're going to meet Iblis, whose name etymologically is rooted in hopelessness, right? Balasa, that's what it's derived from. And it's not saying go on the straight path so you avoid Iblis. He's saying to Allah that I am going to wait for them on this thing that they're asking you to guide them towards. And the successes are rooted in the overcoming of these challenges, not in a trajectory that lacks challenge, but indicative of growth is that there's actual challenge, right? May Allah grant us ease in it, but it's literally saying to you, the source of which you are supplicating in order to overcome that which creates doubt is going to have you meet like the sources of doubt to begin with. Understanding this inwardly is important and not turning it into something that's complicated because it's not complicated. It's purposely simple. You just have to determine if you buy into it or not. The waswasa of shaitan that's mentioned, the whispers of shaitan, Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, is on page 1 of the Quran. The last page of the Quran in Surah An-Nas has us invoking the divine, Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas, malikin nas, ilahin nas. We're asking of Allah threefold until we seek protection min sharril waswasil khannas, from like the whispers of essentially like the shayateen, right? Because it's a very real thing. At some level, there's a transition that I move from being whispered to at my insecurities to now just becoming habituated and becoming subservient to lower desire, right? أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَى, the Quran says, do you see the one who takes his hawa, his desire, as being his Lord, his God? So when that transition comes and you're just bombarded with it again and again and again until it becomes innate, like the waswasa stops, and now it's there at the level of repetitive thoughts. It's there at the level of consistent habit and practice combined with habituated thoughts, right? I have a negative cognitive bias. You think 12,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. Of those thoughts, 4 out of 5 are negative on average, and 96% of them are repeat. They're compounded. So you're compounding the negativity again and again and again. How do you know it's going to come up? Well, shaitan is telling you, like, I'm waiting for you on this sirat al-mustaqim. You're going to try to walk on that path. You're going to inevitably find bumps in the road. How you brace yourself to deal with the doubt now becomes important. And in that entirety of the Quran are the capacities to engage in the actualization of this dua, Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. Everything that's coming after that page is going to contribute to having you walk on it with a certain steadiness. And then you see where doubts come in and you got to reflect sometimes, right? You don't have to like answer the question, but literally, how often do you actually read the Quran? And how much of your hesitancy in reading it comes from somebody else is supposed to tell me what this thing says? Is this not doubt? I'm not good enough to read it. I don't know how to read the Arabic. All kinds of things. Where they're sputtering from. The insecurity of the one who's knocking at the sadr, right? The outer layer of the heart that knows where you're vulnerable, not where somebody else is vulnerable. And if you don't know where you're vulnerable, you're going to keep falling into it every time you reach that part of the pathway. And how do you confront it? There's a lot of different ways, but acknowledging first that there is room for me to know the causes of the doubt and then what the doubt consequently brings me towards. And those two buckets are imperative to understand. I want you to take a quick minute of just individual introspection, right? Within yourself. Where am I most vulnerable? My insecurities. Where can shaitan get me the most? If you have a notebook, write it at the top and then answer it in this frame of doubt. Where can shaitan's whispers get me to doubt the most? Self-doubt, doubting in like Allah, doubting in like Allah's ability to forgive. A lot of you in this room think that there are things you have done that are greater than Allah's rahmah. This is the opposite of what our theology teaches us. But where does that doubt come from? Where is it rooted in? A lot of us have doubt that things can change. Where does that come from? A lot of us have doubt in ourselves. We have doubt in others, like suspicion becomes our default. There's a lack of trust. And it's not because I'm a bad person, right? But if I'm stuck in systems constantly, where I'm only valued based off of the amount of dollars I generate or the amount of dollars I have, then I have to be in a place where I sometimes am guarded. Do you see what I mean? Right? And we walk through the world like as a mode of kind of being suspect. We also live in a way where we are suspected before we are deemed to be innocent, right? People assume things about us, and it makes us doubt in our ability to wear our religion with pride. What if somebody knew I was Muslim and then they wouldn't hire me? I have to change the way my name is written on my resume. I can't dress in a certain way overtly. These are very real things. I've had the FBI in my house on numerous occasions. They've told me when I ask them, what do you want? That you're too good to be true. Know that we're watching you, right? It creates inwardly an anxiety. But also then, when you have a deeply heavy traumatic experience, like it can stay with you. And if there's not mechanisms for healing or opportunities to learn from those things, then it's hard to do this. Da'ma yuribuk ila ma la yuribuk. I don't see myself as what I actually am. I see myself through what a structurally racist society wants to see me through. I don't see myself for who I am. I see myself as a consequence of what an abusive relationship left in terms of wounds and scars on my being. Da'ma yuribuk ila ma la yuribuk also has a communal call to it, because the person sitting next to you, they could have grown up in real hellish households. And you don't want to add to their doubt. And you don't want to doubt the reality that people have lived things that we might have just never seen in our lives, right? So just for a minute, think inwardly, where can shaitan get me? Where am I most vulnerable? My insecurities, my anxieties. What are the things that would open the door for self-doubt? Just sit with it for a minute. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is turn to the person next to you. You don't have to say the specifics of what came up, but what is it like just as a process to think about that? Like, what does it feel like experientially to think about where I might have vulnerabilities, insecurities, the things that will elevate doubt within myself? Just that mode of reflection. How is it to engage in that? And then we'll come back and discuss. But go ahead. If you don't know the names of the persons next to you, just share names. Hey, Simon. Yeah, you doing okay?
I'm good. How are you?
Sorry we never met up this
I
summer.
know. You got cancelled,
Yeah.
and then I had
Yeah.
to go back to Pakistan.
We'll figure out for this semester, inshallah. Let me know when you're free. We'll figure out sometime.
I'm free like whenever you're free.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, reach out to me like in a week or so,
Of course,
and then
of
we'll
course.
figure out maybe
Yeah,
coffee or
we
lunch
can,
or
of
something.
course. I
Yeah?
would love to talk to you.
Sounds good. Let's do it. All right.
That's just something. Sometimes everybody has
Okay. How was that? Like, how is it engaging in that mode of introspection? Let's come back because Maghrib's going to be in a few minutes. If people are okay with it, maybe after Maghrib, we'll grab food and then just reconvene for like another 15 minutes. Does that work? Yeah? No? 15, 20 minutes? Is that okay? What was it like? Like, what did we discuss? How was that process like? Just introspecting on where could I be vulnerable? Like, where can Shaitan get me? Yeah.
I feel like one of the biggest things, especially like my experience when I reflect, right? So maybe it will be something on the past or something that I felt or something that reoccurred, right? Like a reoccurring theme. I feel like the biggest form of waswas, it's like where you try to invalidate yourself and say, "Oh, you're crazy. That never happened," or it's like, "Oh yeah, you're just blowing it up. It's too much. Like you're making it such a big deal." Or it's like, "Oh, like if like like no one else believes you. If you say something, like you get in serious trouble or something like that." I feel like sometimes having like a reassurance to someone tell you, "Hey, you're not crazy," because guess what? Maybe someone else went through the same thing, right, with you, or someone else can empathize with you to some degree. That could definitely be like I guess one of the biggest reliefs to that.
Maghrib is still a few minutes away, just so people know in case you were fasting. We're passing out dates, but not to cut you off. Here, go ahead.
Well, that's gonna end. So,
Yeah, you good?
yeah.
Yeah, and this is a key point that we're going to talk about after we pray. Like, what are things that can reinforce us when we're in a moment of doubt, right? Because something causes doubt, and then doubt brings us to do certain things also. And we want to be able to identify both of those things so that we're not just like numbing feelings or turning towards things that are band-aid solutions. Doubt is not a bad thing, like at all times. All emotions have like a role to them, right? How we respond to them can be good or bad, do you know? But say you are walking around the camera and the wires, and there's a sense of trepidation, like I don't want to break this thing. Anxiety is what's making you going to walk around on it like tiptoed, you know? It looks expensive. It is expensive. So don't break it, right? But the anxiety serves a purpose in that mode. But when it's on steroids, the anxiety, then it becomes like toxic for us. Sometimes you want to have doubt. Do you know what I mean? Like you land, thanks man, Zaklaka. If you ever land at JFK Airport, right? How many times do people tell you to get in a car with them? That you should never get in a car with any of those people. Do you know what I mean? What is kicking in your head in that moment? Some random guy comes and standing right next to them is a sign that says, don't accept car rides from strangers, right? That's the sign in JFK Airport. And he's standing next to the sign and says, just come with me in my car. It's going to be the greatest ride ever, right? No, what's kicking in your head is doubt. Like you doubt that this is a good idea, right? And it's bringing you now from the place of doubt. I will not get into your car, strange man. And you go to the place where there's no doubt, right? Stand in the taxi line. Call the Uber from your phone, right? Da ma yuribuk ila ma la yuribuk. It serves a purpose. Do you know what I mean? But if you're not able to maneuver from the actual place of doubt to the place where there's no doubt, then you're stuck in the doubt. And you want to get out of it. It's an entry point to something. And it reinforces, it gives strength. What else was it like just to reflect on individual insecurities, like where shaitan might get us? Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, shaitan's biggest goal is just like to drain as much energy out of us as it possibly can. So like, for example, like, you know, we mentioned like, you know, like, I mean, no one's perfect, but, you know, no human is perfect, right? So when shaitan knows how you easily can slip up, he wants you to keep slipping up. He doesn't want you to, he wants you to think that you can't turn back. And sometimes, you know, it's not the best thing in the world, but if you keep slipping up, then Allah wants to bring you closer. He'll send you signs to bring you closer. But the whole goal of it is to literally just like eat away at your, like he just wants to take every ounce of energy that you have, where you don't have the mental capacity to do it. You don't even have like physically, mentally, emotionally, all like, you know, all the above. He just wants to steal that from you. And it's a tough thing, obviously, at the end of the day, because we are human. But at the end of the day, it's just like having that conscience of Allah, knowing that you can always go back.
Yeah. And we get to places where like we have voices around us that permeate us with negative reinforcement. We're surrounded by people who are filled with their own doubt and their own kind of inward angst that channels into us, you know, and it creates perspective. So after Maghrib, we're going to talk about that a little bit more. We're going to talk about ways that we can overcome some of these things and reinforce them very concretely, right? Because right in the beginning of the book as well, in Surah Al-Baqarah, it tells us, right, ذَلْكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, that this is a book, in it there is no doubt, right? And so one of the avenues to overcome doubt is to bring certitude. So when you have questions, you're actually answering them with concrete information. And then when you have like a knowledge base, as much as the feeling wants you to think otherwise, you know that that person is not good for you. As hard as it might be to affirm that, because you love them and you care about them, they don't treat you well. Dama yuribuk ila ma la yuribuk. You know those people bring out the worst in you. You know that this place that you're working at contributes to like all kinds of social evils and ailments. And every day, your heart is giving you indication. Do you know? Or when you find out information, and then that knowledge base empowers from the people around you, that they remind you, hey man, you actually are a lot better than you let yourself believe. You hate on yourself too much. Like, how do we address doubt with strategy so we don't spiral into things that are purposely built to, in a consumer-driven society, make us self-deprecate, so we just numb pain and numb anxiety and don't really heal from it. And simultaneously, we then don't grow into contentment. We're just satisfied with base complacency. So after Maghrib, we'll kind of pick up a bit. If people want to just move their chairs to this side, I don't know where we're going to put the food fully, but we'll put it someplace. that will be convenient for everyone to access. And once people get iftar and stuff, then we'll take a seat again and we'll resume. But we'll let people know when that's going to happen. Okay. Can someone call the adhan for Maghrib? So if people want to just pull up the hadith, if you're just joining us, we're looking at the 11th hadith of the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi. Da'ma yuribuk ila ma la yuribuk. We'll look at it for another 15 minutes or so, and then we'll serve food. There's some halal pizza on the way from a new pizza place. It's called Pizza Love Sauce. It's really good. Yeah. Sauce is good? Sauce, yeah, there you go. So where we were leaving off right before we broke to pray was to just talk about kind of where the sources of some of these doubts are. And that inward sense of self-awareness becomes important because doubt is not something like you can hold in your hand. Do you see what I mean? And you want to be able to understand a relationship with these things that we experience and feel, because they're not just abstract conceptualized things, they're actual things that can exist within us, right? Iman is something that exists within you. You can't hold it in your hand. You might be able to see on somebody's face the realities of things they're holding inwardly. So I can look at you and see that you're feeling sad, right? You can look at me and you can say, it looks like you haven't slept so much. Do you know? There's things that are indicators from our demeanors, especially if we have regular interactions with people, that we can tell where they're a little bit off in their regular mode of engagement and just how they kind of traverse the world, right? Does that make sense? But if I was to tell you where does doubt exist within you or where you feel it, like you can't isolate it to one part of your being. Do you know? The way if I came and like I just, kicked you in your knee, then you would say my knee hurts, right? But doubt is something that has a capacity of like literally paralyzing us, keeping us from moving forward. You can experience it in its entirety. Why wouldn't Shaitan want to leverage it as a tool? Because the whole idea of this religion is about movement, right? The sunnah is not to be sedentary. The sunnah is to change and adapt and move. So sirah is a pathway. Sharia is a path to water, right? Tariqah is a pathway. It's all about movement. Doubt, consequently, creates paralysis. I just get stuck. I don't know how to move. I don't know how to grow. That's what Shaitan wants. He doesn't even want us to sometimes take step backwards, because even in movement, it's not linear the way we think, right? We have a tradition that we're taught of a God that if we didn't make mistakes, he'd replace us with a creation that does, so he'd have a creation to forgive. And sometimes there's that much more growth through like getting back up on your feet after you fell. But like if you don't move at all, it's not just that you're not falling, you're not growing. You're just the same all the time, right? And when you read this verse from Surah Al-Araf, and Shaitan is saying, I'm going to be waiting on the Sirat al-Mustaqim. When you have an obstacle in front of you, its purpose is to keep you from moving. Like you just get stuck there. There's nothing else you can do. And then I'm stuck. Like all the days feel the same and everything is the same. And I'm living it again and again and again. And there's no adaptation or growth, like inwardly or outwardly. And then I slowly start to lose some of this other stuff, right? Think about when you were consistent in Ramadan with certain actions where there's no whispers of Shaitan, right? Sufidat al-shayateen. The whispers, they stop at that moment. Do you know what I mean? And then what happens post-Ramadan? That's a gradual progression away from consistency in prayers, away from consistency in recitation of Quran, away from consistency in charity, away from consistency in like sharing meals with people that you know and you care about, and all the barakah that comes from all these different things. The obstacle came, and you're just trying to walk through it without any strategy or even willing to admit that it's there or confront it, right? It's a very powerful tool against us, this thing of doubt, when it's in an unhealthy mode of engagement. There's certain things that we can turn to in order to enable us to help overcome it. So these two frames, because they're not the same. One, what causes doubt? How do I overcome that? And two, the consequences of doubt. How do I ensure that I'm overcoming unhealthy responses to doubt? Right? So what are the things that I can do to overcome some of the doubts? Like, what are things that I can engage in to help me, like, overcome it? When you're in a state of doubt, what do you do to deal with that? Does the question make sense? So we can turn to the person next to us and talk this out a bit. How do I overcome this thing, right? Da'ma yuribuk ila ma la yuribuk is not as easy as saying, hey, I don't know if I got impurity on my shirt, so I just got to wash the whole thing, right? But some of it's intrinsically embedded within me. Do you know, how do I shift in the doubts that get kind of instilled and ingrained in those ways? Does the question make sense, right? Dama yuribuk ila ma la yuribuk. I've identified the doubt. Now, what do I do with it? Like, how do I overcome it, confront it, the consequences to it? If you can turn to the person's next to you and talk that out a little bit, what enables me to address and confront doubt in a healthy way? And then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Do you guys know how far away it is? Can you ask Kamal how far it is? Because then I'll wrap up soon if it's here soon.
Like, for example,
Guys, can we move up this way just so people are going to still be coming in to pray? They have room to pray. If you guys can move up and make room for people. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. We can talk it out for another minute or so, and then we'll discuss. Okay. So what are some of the things? Like, if we're trying to confront this now and overcome it, what are some of the avenues, the techniques, like the resources we can turn towards? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Christian.
Well, I'd say a big thing is just like with like experience, like you learn more about yourself. Obviously, like it's a big thing is avoiding the evil eye, and you know that by whatever situations you put yourself in, it could be time and time again for the first time, and just kind of recognizing that and avoiding those things that bring you back to it. Whether it's like certain person watching, certain going on a certain site, going to a certain place. Like those things, you're going to be surrounded by like that energy that then like infiltrates your mindset, and then it could just like then you're in a spiral effect.
Okay. What else? What are things we can do? Yeah. Go ahead.
So if you have any doubts, leave in what is doubtful for what is undoubtful.
Yeah, but how? How do you do that? What else did we discuss? Yeah.
Like sometimes I discuss this with my friends. So sometimes like when you have a good friend like Saliha, might they remind you of something you forget about, or some situation like previously you went through but you forget it because like when you be inside the doubt you forget everything. So sometimes I discuss it with a friend and a good friend who could give me a good insight about it.
Okay. Good friendship, companionship, yeah. And I didn't mean to like push that away, but that's like a very important strategy. Like you leave what is doubtful for that which is not doubtful in every sense of the word, but we want to distill it more, with specificity. What else? Yeah.
I think understanding that the religion is easier for you, so that like you're not overly, you don't make it too hard on yourself, so you understand what it means, like certainty or doubt. So it's not that I'm afraid that if I do miss this and this will happen. Like Allah is understanding of your situation, and you need to know that the religion is easy for you, so you don't have to like make it such a big.
But how do you know that? How does one come to know that? I'm asking you.
I guess internalizing that would be.
No, but in the literal sense, how do you come to know anything about Islam or its characteristics? Huh? You study, you learn it, right? If I have doubt about something, there's ambiguity there. There's uncertainty there because there's not definition or certitude, right? I can be certain in the fact that, you're nice. You can be certain in the fact that I'm a jerk. Then there's no doubt in it, like right? Like there's some people who they're kind of wishy-washy about their racism. At least there's some people who they're straight in your face telling you they're racist and you know how to deal with them. But then there's other people who pretend like they're not, but they actually are. And it creates all these conundrums. Like, are you my friend? Are you not my friend? No, they don't like you as much as other people. Stop pretending, right? But there's definitiveness to it, that I have a sense of doubt in one area versus I have concrete knowledge in the other, right? How you know things is going to be a critical variable in overcoming doubt. So why wouldn't you have doubt about God if you don't know anything about God? How would you know anything about God if you don't ever pick up Allah's book and read it and engage it and reflect upon it? Or the avenues through which you engage it are just like 10-second sound bites. You cannot experience concrete experiential knowledge. This is what Ihsan is. Spirituality is an experiential knowledge without some type of effort and movement towards it. And you can't know the things to reflect upon if those thoughts have never interjected themselves in your mind before, right? The Meccans, they didn't know like Ar-Rahman. It wasn't part of their language, their discourse. They had to be introduced to the idea that Allah is Ar-Rahman in order to then make sense of what does it mean that God is Rahman. You don't know certain things. There's going to be ease in the ignorance that is temporary, but also through that state of ignorance, which is not a pejorative word, it's just the lack of knowledge, it creates then to us a subservience to what it is that we just get drilled with Can you know something without understanding it or thinking about it? Why do you think someone is bad if they're not married? Why? Why do you think you're not a good person if you're not married? Why? Why do you think certain things about people of certain races and certain skin colors? The capacity to process information cannot be rendered through intellectual laziness. That's what stereotyping is. It's a way for us to conveniently, as a cognitive function, just store information in our head and tap into it so we're not overtly thinking, but you can tap into that innately too much. And then you start to believe in certain things that you've heard from people again and again and again. And it gives rise to this information that we have access to. Like, what would people say? Why does that become such a prevailing criteria? Sometimes it's important. Yes, like don't walk on the street without haya, but that's very different from like what would people think. The next hadith we're going to look at, hadith number 12, it says, Min husn al-Islam al-marri tarakahu ma la ya'nihi, that from the beauty of one's Islam is they leave that which does not concern them, meaning that your Islam is beautiful when you mind your own business. So it's not your business whether somebody else has kids or not. It's not your business whether somebody else is married or not. It's not your business. And your Islam is not beautiful if you don't mind your own business. And you can't think about that as kind of like a refutation of somebody's ignorances. You have to think about it principally about the state of my Islam. Here, what we're saying is, like, you can have concrete information. You can have La ilaha illallah and know La ilaha illallah. It doesn't mean you understand La ilaha illallah or comprehend or fathom La ilaha illallah or live by it. Right? And then there becomes these innate buckets of information that we socialize as core beliefs that affirm themselves through how we process reality. I'm worthy of love. I'm not worthy of love. Where did you build that perspective from? I'm beautiful. I'm not beautiful. The Quran says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ, that we created you in the most beautiful of forms. How do you counter that piece of knowledge with what you've been socialized with? Knowing is a first step. And to be able to understand knowledge, not at a surface level, but at a deep level, so that I'm not standing in front of myself or God wondering how many people had to die for me to get this paycheck from this company. How does it contribute to exploitation of different peoples? And does my not knowing become like a justification at that point in time? The contentment that comes from knowledge is that much more important. Have you ever met somebody who has the bittersweet experience of being diagnosed with a mental health condition? It's really hard for a lot of people to process that moment. But the minute that they're told that, well, you have this condition, ADHD, everything of years past that didn't make sense all of a sudden makes sense. They can understand themselves a little bit better, and the doubt that they experience, that doesn't mean I'm broken because I have some type of attention deficit disorder, but I can now make sense of things that I couldn't without that piece of information. A lot of this doesn't make sense if you don't have a certain knowledge and belief in a knowledge of an afterlife and a day of judgment. Then inequitous systems make temporary justice of this world like a goal. But you have to have like a knowledge base and a thirst, not just a regular schedule, a thirst to want to know more, to read more and learn more. I teach at this university different classes. Some of you have taken my classes on the academic side of the university. Statistically, students now, like 60 to 80% of them, research assignments on things like TikTok. You don't want to think about that in a humorous way, because you could laugh about it, but how much time do you spend digesting and consuming information in sound bites versus reading pages of a text? Why do you do that? And a part of it is that you're engaged within a systemic pressure that doesn't have you thinking your own thoughts consciously. Read a book, pick it up and take people's ideas and thoughts to formulate your own ideas and perspectives and thoughts. Other things that become important: when does doubt hit me the most? It's a generalization, but many people who come to sit in my office who are running on empty when they're exhausting, doubt like overcomes them. When are the thoughts the most pervasive? I'm lying in my bed and I'm just thinking about all this stuff and I can't go to sleep. The Prophet ﷺ tells us, "Kullukum ra'in," that all of you are shepherds and all of you are responsible for your sheep. We have a dual role as a shepherd and a sheep. The sheep is not strong when it's alone. The sheep is stronger when it's part of a flock. And the wolf is going to attack the sheep when it's isolated, not when it's all together. You think differently when you're seated in this gathering. This is a gathering, inshallah, that the angels descend into. There's distinct barakah. If there's gatherings that angels descend into, that means by just logical conclusion, there's also gatherings that angels that do not descend into. How many of your days are spent in those types of gatherings? Why wouldn't it impact thoughts? When you're alone and you're by yourself, even when you're surrounded by people, how pervasive do the thoughts come? When you're fighting on values and ethics, and the people you're going against are your caregivers and caretakers, how many arguments do you have with elders in your own family, people in your own family who don't want to give you space to express? And then all kinds of stuff comes up, and then thoughts that scare you that you have, because the doubt becomes so definitive within that you just can't confront it. You want to do something to just stop it in like the worst of means. May Allah protect us from that. So you want to make sure that you're surrounded with hearts that are gentle and tender. And then a subset of that, who do you go to speak to when you have doubts? The companions have a lot of doubts and they speak to the Prophet, but they also speak to each other. And post the prophetic era, there's still people who have doubts. They're going to talk to people. And look at where shaitan attaches an anxiety to an anxiety. I need someone to talk to, and immediately the thought comes, how can you tell anybody about this? Right? You can't let people know this thing about you. And then the minute you start thinking about something that you wrestle with, you start to think about a second layer of stress that adds that much more compounded stress to it. So having those persons that are there, like a third resource just to run through it, you got to have like a solid self-care plan and things that you do to rest and replenish. Shaitan is going to get you when you're running on empty. And I can say this to you because I know some of you are busy and we're busy in different ways. There's none of you in this room that are busier than I am. And I take care of myself, sleep well, eat well, do not chase after like outlets that render complacency purposefully. You need a self-care strategy that is mindful of where you are at this phase of your life. And if you don't design your life, someone else is going to design it for you. And then you're just going to be run ragged throughout all of this. And then the fourth, which is different from having someone to talk to and just being around people, you need to have like good friends, good company that are regular. Like who's part of your tribe, the people you associate with, and make sure they're not creating doubt with you. Like it can be hard, but sometimes the people we spend the most time with are the biggest perpetrators of creating doubt for us, right? Da ma yuribuk ila ma la yuribuk. You know there's certain people that when you're with them, you're thriving. Why don't you make the effort to spend more time with them? You see what I mean? The combination of these things can lay a foundation now that when we go on that sirat al-mustaqim, and shaitan is telling us in Quranic verse, it's in there so that we don't have to figure it out on our own. Allah gave us all the answers. That you have a stronger foundation of confidence that's going to enable you to be confronting. And then even if you slip, you get back up and you stand again. Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim gives us 3 categories in the dua after, right? Sirat al-Ladina an'amta alayhim, right? An'amta alayhim, of the many opinions that are given of what that means, an'amta alayhim, those who have ni'mah upon them, are people who have knowledge and act on what they know. Those are an'amta alayhim. The second group, غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ, the ones who have ghadab against them. May Allah protect us from it. Allah is not happy with them. These are people who have knowledge but don't act on what they know. وَلَدَّالِينَ, like those who are lost, they don't have knowledge and they don't act on anything, right? You want to be in the first category, and that first category becomes a mechanism of creating a concrete attitude. Because if you know something, why wouldn't you act on what you know, right? If you know that you have more clarity and focus on days that you fast than days that you don't, not the first day of Ramadan, but the last nights of Ramadan, how different are they? Why don't you act on what you know? What derailed you? And the whole idea is from that self-awareness, you learn capacity and you go back to what it is that your trajectory could be. Does that make sense? Da'ma yuribuk ila ma la yuribuk. The last thing I'm going to say before I ask you guys to just talk it out a bit. Surah An-Nas that we said in relation to Surah Fatiha, right? Alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudur an-nas, right? That's what we're looking for protection from, right? And then what does it say? Min al-jinnati wan-nas. That it's not just about protection from shaitan and his whispers, but there's also a protection from humans. I might be the biggest catalyst of doubt in someone's life. And you want to understand Hadith and Quran in relation, not compartmentalized. So when the Prophet says, "Man kana yu'minu billahi wa bil yawmil akhir falyakul khayran aw liyasmut," that whosoever habitually believes in Allah on the last day, let them speak good or be silent. You might think what you're saying is hitting a certain way, but in reality, it's just breaking somebody down even more. The number of times I sit with couples in my office, I sit with families in my office, and all we're doing is I'm saying to them, do you know what you said, how it sounds like to this person? And they'll say, well, that's not what I meant, but that's why intention and action both have to be correct, not just intention, because intention and impact are both measured. And you have to think about your capacity of being both a means through which confidence is instilled within someone, as well as the potential of doubt being instilled within somebody. And not just the words, but the timeliness of the words, the tenor of the words, the volume of the words. And how, if you don't know how it's going to land, your own doubt and anxiety in a stressful situation doesn't mean you just throw words at somebody to appease like the ill feeling you have because you don't want to see someone that you care about hurting. But if it doesn't make sense, it still doesn't make sense. And there is a lot of doubt that people carry in their hearts from how it is that the people around them have put doubt inside of them. And you just got to be open to the idea that if that's been put inside of me, I can only give to somebody what I possess in the first place. And I have to be in a place where I start to reconcile some of the things that I'm holding within myself. Because you don't want to be the person who makes someone doubt Allah. You don't want to be the person who makes somebody doubt like an afterlife. And it's important, right? And you're sitting here for some reason. So it's not just about feel-good stuff. If you're teaching somebody that it's okay for them to forego praying one of their daily prayers, you're creating doubt in something that Allah has created certitude. You could say, I struggle with it. But if you say it's not a big deal, just do them all when you get home. It's not really a big deal, right? And subtle things make a difference. That's why you read the Hadith. We have in our tradition that when there's 3 people and 2 of them share a language and one of them does not understand the language, you don't speak the language that the other doesn't understand. Why? If we start talking in a language that you don't get, why wouldn't it make him uncomfortable? And then it creates the seed of doubt and the entry point for shaitan to come. And we might be thinking, well, we're not doing anything that's problematic. And is it across the board? No. Like if the three of us get along pretty well, right? My kids don't speak languages that my wife and I speak. My mom doesn't speak all the languages that my wife and I speak. Sometimes we will, but we have my wife and I have been married in 2 weeks. It'll be our 13th wedding anniversary. Do you know? Alhamdulillah. She's not going to say, what were you and your mother talking about in front of me? But we know that in that situation, right? I don't sit and talk in front of all of you in different languages when I'm talking to individuals because it can create doubt. And that's the avenue that shaitan interjects to create challenge. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? And we want to be able to understand, am I potentially the thing that somebody needs to move away from? Because I'm throwing all kinds of stuff thinking it's helpful, but in reality, it's just adding to the clutter and the mess. Do you know? And one of the most foolish things is to speak in language that's not your own. And you're just reiterating something you learned on a YouTube video that isn't even sound like you, you know? And you don't know how it's landing with somebody. Do you see what I mean? That's why I ask you when you sit down to talk to each other and learn each other's names so you know who you're talking to as a whole person rather than talking at someone. You see, right? Da'ma yuribuk ila ma la yuribuk. Make dua that you're not the source of doubt for people. And then in your own doubtful matters, the best thing to do is this, ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, from your heart. So it's not just done instinctively, but you think within yourself, who else am I going to ask to alleviate doubt other than Allah, who is the source of all things that are good? Hamza radiallahu an, when he goes head to head with Abu Jahl, and he tells Abu Jahl, we talked about this in the Wednesday night Sirah class, that I am with my nephew. If you are going to attack him, you're with me. He then goes to the Prophet and he says, that night, I didn't really know if I believed in what I said. That he was just going at it with this man who attacked his nephew, and I'm standing for his honor and my honor and our clan's honor. And what does he do in that night? He just opens his heart and turns to the divine, asking for clarity, asking for guidance and insight. You can't pray to Allah for guidance if you don't pray to Allah. Right? And it's really hard to pray to Allah if you're being submissive to something else in the process. So make those du'as, ask Allah for that clarity and to remove these doubtful matters so that you have certitude in the things that you know are pleasing to Him. Okay, so let's take a quick minute. If you can turn the persons next to you, what are some of the things we're taking away from today's conversation? And then we'll wrap up. And hopefully all the food will be here at that time. Is it here? They're downstairs? Great. So let's talk it out for 2 minutes, and then we'll eat some halal pepperoni pizza. Don't doubt it. Yeah, go ahead. No doubt. Yeah. What are you taking away from today? And then we'll come back and discuss, but go ahead.
I think it's
put black people to a lot of living there. They don't want to be meeting where this thing is actually all.
Okay. What are some of the things that are coming up we're taking away? And then what we'll do is, if people can help, we'll move like the tables over here. We'll set up the food and the pizza. And then if you guys want to text people that you know are in the building or go out in the lounge, because I think there's going to be a lot of pizza that we got to finish. It's just a little bit late. What are some?
How much we're gonna eat?
Huh?
You're doubting how much we're gonna eat.
I am not. I just don't want to waste any food. I feel bad. Yeah. What are we taking away from today? That was funny, by the way. Good job. It was great. Any takeaways? What's today's conversation bringing up for people? Yeah.
I think just the biggest one is remembering that whenever that little doubt that creeps in your head, it's just Shaitan trying to get to you, and that's what it is at the end of the day. And then like knowing that you can always turn back, because every time I've turned back and I've opened the Quran at the exact time, exact page that I needed to reassure that in myself. Not like I lose belief or like the knowing of what's in the book. It's just the fact that like you need those, like you said, subtle reminders. They're key. So sometimes like, you know, you'll just stumble upon it. When I said about signs, there's signs everywhere, and the, you know, all and the knowledge that you need from that to understand it and kind of like sit back and let everything soak in, resonate, and then like you can kind of understand it. It's all there in the book.
Great. Other thoughts, other takeaways? Things are kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I think the question that you asked earlier is like, how do you know that? And that's because of knowledge. I think that's like so true. You can only implement it if you know whatever that is, the reasons you're following it. And it also reminds me of Hadith, like where the Prophet ﷺ said that seeking knowledge is compulsory upon every Muslim as well. I guess that would like reconcile with this as well. If you knew the rules and the rulings and everything regarding it, then you would be able to implement it.
Yeah, right. And it's like, why? Why would that be something that everyone would need? It's so that you find like this contentment inwardly, right? We're meant to be creatures that have that kind of engagement in knowledge acquisition, and not in a way where it's just to size up or weaponize Islam to like bring somebody else down. You're not doing this well enough for that. Or that like you're impressing people just by like spitting and quoting stuff. Is so you can act upon the stuff that you know, right? And then you start to think out, well, how do I even know? Like literally, how much do you know of Allah from Allah? How much have you learned of Allah through like his book and his words and like the teachings of his messenger versus like others who do a really bad job at speaking on God's behalf, right? How many times was God brought in to like your relationship with faith in a way to tell you how God's going to be upset with you or angry with you? Do you know, you just hear it again and again and again. Do you know what I mean? But like the Prophet was getting verses of the Quran like Wadduha when he is at his wit's end, saying like Allah is here with you, you know, like a gentle, nurturing, compassionate Rabb. This is what the word Rabb means. Do you know? And unlearning some of those things become important. Okay, so pizza's here. What we're gonna do is take a pause, and we'll figure out for next week how we can orient everything in terms of like food, iftar, like the halakha. People have ideas, let us know. But if we can have people kind of help, we're going to move the tables to the middle of the room so you can follow directions from Kamal and Manaf where we need some help. And then please do stick around just so we can kind of, one of the reasons why we also want to have iftar is that we can like be in community with each other, get to know each other a little bit better. So we're not just like kind of sitting and engaging in kind of discussion, but deepening those relationships. And then we'll pray Isha probably close to 9, inshallah, when it comes in. Okay, we'll see everyone next Monday. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. The iftars are also potluck, so feel free to